Hi, everybody, and welcome to our program. My name is David Nevins for Citybiz List, and today we continue with another of our discussions in partnership with the Bridge Alliance, which we call Repairing America's Broken Democracy. And most of us agree it needs a little bit of repair, I think. So our special guest today is Katie Usalis, and Katie is the Strategic Partnerships Director of an organization called RepresentWomen. Katie, welcome to our program.
Hi, David. Thank you so much for having me today.
It's our pleasure. So, Katie, let's just begin with the basics. Tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about RepresentWomen and what you do for the organization.
Yes, happy to. Yes, my name is Katie Usalis, as you said. I'm working with RepresentWomen in their partnerships and programs. And before I joined RepresentWomen, I was actually working in the international development world. So working and living in Southeast Asia, in Myanmar, and really working on programs around advocacy for human rights and social justice. And this is a huge reason why I'm so passionate about representation in politics. In my years there, I worked for a local organization that was kind of filling service gaps for people with disabilities that the government didn't have the capacity to fill. And I just really realized the importance of having those people at the bottom of the totem pole, those people kind of on the fringes of society, in those policymaking positions in order to ever have, sustainable equity and sustainable justice in society. So those years of experience working in international development, working on social justice, paired with kind of the way that the wool has been pulled from our eyes and all the things that we've learned over the last several years around from the Me Too movement, from George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, from COVID, all these kinds of things combined to really instill a passion in me for addressing the issues in the United States and kind of turning my gaze back to the United States and knowing the influence that the U.S. has as a global, on global governance, on global priorities, on all these really important things. Yet we have a lot of work to do, as you mentioned, on our own front, on our own democracy front. So I joined the RepresentWomen team, and I think we're really special and unique in this space because we are a research and advocacy hub, which a lot of organizations are working on democracy reform, but we are working specifically on breaking down the structural barriers that women face to running in U.S. politics, to winning and serving and leading. And there are a lot of organizations doing really, really important work on empowering women to run and funding women candidates and building community around women candidates. But until we address kind of the more systemic barriers that are built in, these women candidates, no matter how many there are, they will kind of continue running up against these barriers. So RepresentWomen is the only organization at the moment, but we hope this will change, that is working on building evidence around the barriers that women face, the structural barriers, and also the different solutions that we know will remedy those barriers and kind of level the playing field for underrepresented groups.
Tell me a little bit about those barriers. I mean, it does seem, and hopefully you would agree, that certainly women have made significant progress relative to their involvement in government and politics in the U.S. Over the last few decades, for sure. But obviously, your view and the view of RepresentWomen, I would assume, is that progress, while good, is insufficient. So, if you don't mind, share a little bit in terms of specifics. What are some of those barriers, and what are you and your colleagues doing to try to overcome them?
Great question. And you're absolutely right. We have, I think at the moment, yet another historic number of women in Congress. However, this is still about 27% of Congress is women, which is not nearly close to the 51% of women that make up the U.S. population. So indeed, there are specific barriers that women face. And RepresentWomen has found that women come up against barriers really at every stage of the political life cycle. So when women run, when women try to win elections, when women manage to win, they continue to face barriers in leading in their parties and actually just being able to serve in their role properly. The system that we have now, the system as we know it, was designed back in the day by men, and actually a group of pretty privileged men. And this is a system that worked for them at the time. However, we know the demographics are changing, the country is changing, and it's really kind of about modernizing that system. So barriers, when women run, we know that women are underfunded and women are under-recruited. And I'm going to try to go through these quickly. And if you want to know more, please look at our website. We have loads of more information on this. So those are the barriers when women run. When it comes to how we choose our representatives, we use a winner-take-all system, which is full of multiple kind of reinforcing barriers that disadvantage women. So, for example, winner-take-all elections actually promote negative campaigns, which I think 70% of women report that's the number one reason why they are not interested in a career in politics. We know that women not only receive more attack ads, but the nature of those attack ads are more personal and more violent. So that's part of the problem with winner-take-all elections. Also, party leaders often tell women candidates to wait their turn because they don't want women candidates to take votes away from the more viable candidate. And I can think of race after race where there's really, impressive, high qualified women candidates that drop out of the race before the election day. It's so heartbreaking. Also in winner-take-all elections, voters have to be really strategic with where they put their vote because they can choose one, they can choose one person and they don't want to waste their vote, fear of wasting their vote on a candidate who probably won't win. And then, what happens then if their vote's wasted and the bad guy wins the election? So oftentimes women don't receive that vote, especially women of color don't receive that vote. And for all these reasons combined, we have this really powerful influence of the incumbent advantage. And because of our history, because of our culture, most incumbents at the moment are white and male.
Yeah, no, I mean, to your point, perhaps because of social media, because of advertising, because of fundraising, just generally because of the power of incumbency. If women occupy, let's just say roughly 25% of the elected officials in the country, change, particularly in politics, for the reasons we just discussed, is slow. So, yeah, to get to 50 or 51% is going to go a little bit slower than if it were in a different field. So Katie, kudos to you and your colleagues in terms of what you're doing. How are you going about this, and how do people, how can others get involved in your work?
Yeah, great question. So we kind of maneuver two different levers of change. And the first one, which is kind of our bedrock, our bread and butter, is knowledge building. So we do research on what needs to change. So that's the barriers that women face and the solutions that address those barriers. And then also the how to make change happen. So understanding and mapping the pathways for how to make change happen in the US, analyzing different initiatives, seeing what has worked and what has not worked. And then the second lever is strategic engagement, catalyzing change through strategic engagement. And we really target three main groups for that engagement. The first is decision makers and gatekeepers. So those are people like elected officials, candidates, PACs, election officials also. And then we target change makers, which are kind of the people on the ground rolling up their sleeves. That's activists, lobbyists, advocates, all the different kinds of democracy reform organizations in the different states across the country. And then the third target group that we try to work with and partner with are, I guess, what we would call influencers. So thought leaders. Those are academics, journalists, funders, and kind of just those that are seen as respected voices or voices of authority on how to do democracy well.
I would imagine it's a pretty powerful thing when you remind those in power that women make up 51% of the population. So therefore, that's a group that people who want to stay in power might want to listen to. And then I guess also you might have issues reminding women themselves that it's potentially to their advantage to vote for other women candidates. Share that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yes, absolutely. And, this is really kind of what it comes down to for us. When we talk about gender balance or representation, it's important because it's fair, but it's so much more than that. It's really about representation of voice, representation of experience. And all of us have different lived experiences, and those lived experiences shape our realities. They shape how we view what problems are in our country. It shapes what creative solutions we come up with. And 60% of our lawmakers are white men at the moment. However, white men only make up 30% of the population. And that perspective and that lived experience is very important and very valuable. It's just overrepresented. It's just overrepresented in our lawmakers. So if women would like to see the issues that they care about being addressed through policy outcomes, the key is to get more women in office. If we want laws and policies and systems that better serve our communities and the needs of our communities, we have to change the lawmakers. So that's really why we value representation.
So that seems pretty fair and pretty logical in that regard. We only have a moment or two left, but I know you have some exciting things coming up, opportunities for people to become more involved in your organization. Please feel free to share those.
Yes, we have July is chock full of releases. Our research team has been busy and our comms team has been busy producing some really exciting reports. We have a report coming out about the current state of affairs in gender balanced in state cabinets, analyzing representation in state cabinets, which we know, and I think Americans are becoming increasingly aware of the importance of representation at the state level. And then the second one coming out in July is an analysis of best practices for advancing gender balanced appointments. So it's kind of a partner piece with the state cabinets because those are often appointed positions. So what initiatives we've seen across the country, digging deep into what has worked and what has not worked for advancing gender balanced appointments. And I think that tool would be especially useful for that kind of change makers bracket, those advocates and advocacy organizations on the ground trying to do similar initiatives. And just one more I'd like to mention, we don't have a release date quite yet, but it will be sometime this summer. A report on the outcomes of New York City. I don't know if you remember, but in New York City last year, they elected their first ever female majority city council. So 61% women on New York City's city council. And then 85% of those women are women of color. And this was just a huge success, a really historic event. And so, of course, we were curious, how did this come about? So we analyzed all the different ingredients, looked at all the pieces of the puzzle, how they worked together to create this success, and then kind of making recommendations for how this could be replicated or adapted for similar cities. So that's the third really exciting thing we have coming this summer.
No, that's terrific. I look forward actually to taking a look at those reports and learning more. So Katie, lastly, how does someone become involved with or learn more about RepresentWomen?
Yes. So, of course, if you are listening to this and this is interesting to you and you're just an individual out there in the world, we would love for you to go to our website and sign up for our email updates. That way you'll make sure to get those 3 reports that I just mentioned in your inbox as soon as they're released. And then, of course, following us on social media at RepresentWomen. We are on all the major platforms. But if you are actually part of an organization that is interested in doing a little bit deeper work together, partnering together, we do offer different partnership packages, from working together as allies, elevating each other's work. We can equip you with some of our tools and resources to maybe forming a deeper partnership in your state, working together on a specific project or program. We are open to all those things. So definitely connect with us on our website and through our social media.
So Katie, thank you so much. I think this has been a fascinating short discussion, and I hope a number of our viewers choose to learn more and get the reports and advance the prospect and the role of women in American politics. That can't be a bad thing, for sure.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie. Our guest today has been Katie Usalis, representing RepresentWomen. This has been David Nevins for Citybiz List, and this has been another in our conversations as part of the Bridge Alliance's efforts to repair America's broken democracy. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Katie, for joining us as well.